Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Bingham's Midnight Advance, the story of his thrilling march in the Badlands. The subheadline says, Relieve the heroes of the Wounded Knee Battle, Captain Wood's heroism at the Battle of San Juan. It says, Major Gonzales S. Bingham, who was recently appointed Commandant of the Schuylkill Arsenal, was a few years ago the hero of a midnight march as thrilling as was Wolseley's celebrated advance on Tel El Khyber. It was just about nightfall on the evening of December 29, 1890, when Lieutenant Bingham, then stationed at the Rosebud Indian Agency in the Dakotas, received orders to march with 2 troops of cavalry and 1 company of infantry to relieve the 7th Infantry, supposed to be surrounded by an immense army of hostile Sioux Indians. The 7th's position was supposed to be somewhere beyond the Badlands, and it was with a feeling of uncertainty that the sturdy troopers swung themselves to their horses' backs in strict obedience to the shrill bugle call of boots and saddles. Christmas had only been celebrated 4 days before, and many of the soldiers had hardly finished inspecting presents sent them from the distant east, when the stern command, "Forward, march," sent them into the open arms of the night. The 2 troops of cavalry formed the van, and it can be safely said that there were few dry feminine eyes in old Rosebud that night when Lieutenant Bingham and his gallant band marched away. Old troopers who bore upon their gallant breasts the scars of many a hard-fought battle shook their heads in solemn unison as the brave lieutenant waved adieu to his young wife. Everything seemed to forebode disaster. Dark clouds seemed to forebode disaster. Dark clouds scudded across the sky, and only that day a scout had come in all covered with blood and bearing the awful information that the foothills were alive with fierce bucks, crazed with the mystic revolutions of the ghost dance and the wild chants of the medicine men. It was to meet these treacherous foes, drunk with lust for rapine and blood, that Lieutenant Bingham and his brave followers left Rosebud Agency on the 4th night after Christmas, 1890. The night was bitter cold, and the iron-shod hooves of the horses struck the hard ground of the road that led to the agency with a metallic ring. As rank behind rank they filed away. As soon as the lights of Rosebud became mere specks in the distance, Lieutenant Bingham gave orders that the troopers should lead the beaten path, and that strict silence should be observed in the ranks. The wisdom of this order cannot be questioned, for the watchfires that would suddenly gleam and go out on the tops of the neighboring hills told plainer than words that the Indians were signaling to one another, and that they were probably aware that the palefaces were approaching, armed to the teeth, and determined to do or die. The wind swept across the ocean-like prairies in great gusts, but happily blew from the foothills, and therefore did not carry the scent of the troopers to the enemy. The eastern sky had grown gray at the magic touch of morn, when the little band crossed the borders of the Badlands, that godforsaken stretch of territory where crime ran rampant in the years gone by. Entering a rocky defile, the lieutenant gave orders to bivouac, and the men lay down beside their horses with rifles clasped in their hands, and saddles beneath their heads in lieu of pillows. Several hours later, the march was resumed, and the men and horses forged forward through the dreary passes and across streams that went tumbling down the mountains with a sound like the fabled din of hell. Another day had dawned, when a scout, who had been sent ahead to look over the lay of the land, rode back and informed Lieutenant Bingham that a desperate battle was being fought about 10 miles away. This was startling news indeed, and the little command moved forward on the double quick. Knowing that the Indians outnumbered the white men 10 to 1, Lieutenant Bingham spread his troopers out in such a fashion that the detachment had all the appearance of being a vast army instead of a handful of men. When Bingham's men came over a high hill, they looked down upon the bloody field of Wounded Knee. Chief Bigfoot, Sitting Bull's right-hand man, had led his painted braves to their death, and disciplined valor had won the day. The palefaces sounded their paeans over the red men's graves. Major Bingham, the hero of that thrilling march through the Badlands to the relief of the heroes of Wounded Knee, is today in the prime of life, and justly reckoned one of the handsomest men in Uncle Sam's army. Born at Pensacola, Florida, Gonzales S. Bingham was appointed from civil life as a 2nd lieutenant in the 2nd Infantry, and rose rapidly through merit to the rank he now holds. Brevet Brigadier General Judson Bingham, retired, the major's father, served in the Quartermaster's Department of the Army and was stationed for many years in Florida, where his son was born. By the way, there is another man at the Schuylkill Arsenal that Philadelphia may well be proud to have within her bounds. He is a little man and wears upon his shoulders the double bars of a captain. This little man with the captain's bars upon his shoulders is Winthrop S. Wood, late first lieutenant and adjutant of the 9th United States Cavalry and a true blue hero of the Spanish-American War. Lieutenant Wood was one of the men who charged up the bloody hill of San Juan. When the smoke had cleared away, Lieutenant Wood was carried from the battlefield as dead. A Mauser bullet had torn its way through the lieutenant's cheek, and after destroying most of his teeth, had gone through the mouth down into his neck. After being in the hospital for a long time, Lieutenant Wood came to Washington to have new teeth fitted in his head. When the dentist looked at the man's mouth, he saw that he had a case that called for extreme skill. Every tooth had been ruined by the Spanish sharpshooter's bullet. Some were broken in half, while of others only the roots remained. Indeed, the man's mouth was in such a horrible state that the dentist was obliged to consult with several of his professional brethren as to how the teeth should be fitted in. It was impossible to fit them on a plate, such as was generally used. It took just 4 months for the dentist to extract the roots and pieces of teeth from Lieutenant Wood's mouth. They had to saw a bone here and a bone there, until time and again the patient fainted under the terrible pain that he was subjected to. Sometimes he would be compelled to stay away from the chair for a week at a time, as his system would not stand the strain. Finally, after patience had almost ceased to be a virtue, success crowned the efforts of the dentist. Somehow they got his jaws into shape, and then the new teeth were inserted with a vengeance. Into the places made vacant by the teeth knocked out by the Spanish bullet at San Juan, new molars were recently fitted, and so Lieutenant Wood had a whole new set of teeth once again. Though at first he experienced considerable difficulty in properly articulating, the lieutenant soon learned to talk with the fluency that he had been wont to in the days before he dreamt of San Juan Hill or the war with Spain. Lieutenant Wood, however, was not done with doctoring when he left the dentist. He had still a Mauser bullet in his shoulder, and that had to be cut out. At the soldiers' home, this job was done, and the lieutenant says that the pain attending the operation was not half as great as when his shining new teeth had to be fitted in. These United States are not ungrateful of their heroes. When Lieutenant Wood had arisen from the dentist chair after a sitting of 4 months and had safely left the operating table minus a Mauser bullet extracted from his shoulder, he did not find an insignificant piece of brass called a medal awaiting him, but instead a fat berth in the quartermaster's department in the good city of Philadelphia, and also the rank of captain. Among other things, the order making Lieutenant Wood a captain said, "For gallantry and wounds received in action." That means a great deal when signed by the Secretary of War. Such is the story of Major Bingham and Captain Wood, one the hero of an Indian campaign, the memory of which will last as long as time itself, and the other, well, he was one of the few that returned from the mouth of hell by way of San Juan Hill. This story came from the great state of Pennsylvania, being reported in the Philadelphia Times of December 18, 1898. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.